Black queen, you're immaculate. It's coming like the world ain't ready for your magic yet. And that was never your fault, man. I guess the...
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Black Tech Unplugged. I'm joined by Yasmine today. Hey, Yas.
Hey, how are you?
Good. I'm very excited to have you here. And actually, to kick off the episode, I usually kick off with something called the check-in. So this is like a brief introduction. So I want you to just say your full name, location, your current role, and then the number of years you've been in tech.
Yeah, my name is Yasmine Hill. I have been in tech for about 6 years, and recruiting in 8, and I'm located in Chicago.
Yes, nice and cool, we'll say. Chicago. Chicago.
Yeah. It's warm today. I think it's 30. So
yes, right. And that's hot for Chicago.
Warm Chicago day. I almost broke out the shorts.
So yes, just to get started talking about you and your career, your technical title is technical sourcer. So I wanted to start off with, what does that really mean? Like, what do you do in your role?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so technical sourcing can mean different things depending on the organization. But what I do primarily and what a sourcer would do is find candidates and engage them and move them through the process. Now, for some sourcers, they may stop their process and hand off to a recruiter when it comes to on-site, and the recruiter does all the closing and negotiation. Some sourcers take the candidate entirely through the process, and that's depending on the organization and how they have things set up. But what I can say is that the sourcer is the expert in finding a candidate, so sourcing, and then engaging those candidates.
And for you, how do you find candidates? Where do you look?
Oh, that's a great question. Mostly, I feel like there's a lot of candidates on LinkedIn, but what I really like to do is leverage file type sourcing and different types of Boolean strings. And so I use Google, DuckDuckGo, and Bing to find candidates. So they may be, I may find their GitHub, or I may find them on a different forum and things like that. And then I try to track their resume down, their contact information down, to be able to reach out to them. But I'm looking everywhere. I'm looking high and low. I'm going to different meetings. If you have a friend that has a friend, I always try to leverage my own network. So anyone that I've already spoken to, hey, do you know anyone with, this skill set? And who do you work with? And who have you worked with? Who do you enjoy working with? And kind of take it from there. I think the best way to find a candidate is finding them through your network and people you already know, people that can vouch for you and they can vouch for them as well.
Now, so when it comes to finding a candidate, what catches your eye? Because obviously there's like a million people on LinkedIn. And so what actually catches your eye? Is it their type, or I shouldn't say their title, but that line that you could put like your current role, or is it their bio? Like, what actually catches your attention?
So when I'm looking for a specific type of profile, I'm looking at the skill set and the responsibilities. So it's super important for any job seeker to list those in their profile, list those on their resumes, so they are findable. Titles vary, through different organizations. So a data scientist at LinkedIn may not be the same as a data scientist for, PepsiCo.
Right.
They may have different responsibilities. And so for me, it really comes down to what you're doing on the day-to-day. Who are your stakeholders? Who are you supporting? What tools have you worked with? What languages are you working with? What certifications you have? Those are the things to highlight in a profile, in a resume, because that's what I'm going to look for. A title doesn't necessarily always reflect what you're doing, or doesn't translate to the job description that I may have.
Right. And how many times have you run into where you think someone has a certain responsibilities or, hold certain credibility, and then you're going through the interview process and you're like, wow, you didn't do exactly what I thought you did. And now you're not a good fit.
Oh gosh, I think that happens maybe 30 to 50% of the time.
Wow.
And it's really having those conversations. I'll say this. Oftentimes it's that people don't put enough on the resumes. I find that especially in tech, there's little to no detail. It's sort of like, okay, well, I work with SQL, I work with Python, but what are you doing? Like, are you using it for object oriented language? Are you, like working with data? So those details are important, but when you have those conversations, initially on the first conversation that I have, I'm able to get a good grasp of like, oh, well, what's on your resume is maybe what your team did, but not what you've done specifically. And so I find that with a lot of maybe junior candidates, someone that's 1 to 3 years and maybe 1 to 5 years, as you get more seniority, I think people get a better understanding that, and they have more experience with interviewing, they understand that I would be looking for what you've done and not necessarily what your team has done.
Yes.
So it can happen quite often. I would say that once it happened a lot more when I first started recruiting, and less now because I have a better understanding of what questions to ask, and I have a better conceptual knowledge of the skill set that I'm supporting. When I first started, I may have been sourcing for a Java developer, and I didn't know the difference between Java and JavaScript. So they said, hey,
you're like, hey, I'm just here, getting my check.
Yeah, pretty much. They were like, yeah, I Java develop, and I was like, okay, like someone else that's more technical will figure it out, like, but it won't be me. And I think that was the turning point once I realized, like, I do need to have a better understanding of what these people do to have a conversation, and just being transparent about it. Like, I'm not a developer. So I will, if it's a new skill set, I'll tell them straight up, like, I don't know what you do. Can you explain what you do in layman's terms? And that makes all the difference. If they're able to explain what they do, then I can believe them. that's probably what you do. Like I source every day, so I'm able to break that down. But if you ask me about, maybe changing oil or, tire pressure, I'm like, you put the air in the tire and that's it. Yeah, right. That's not me. That is not me. There's someone else that does that. Right. So it has the potential. I think starting outsourcing, it happened a lot more where you get in a conversation and you're pushing people through because they sound good, and I want to fill the role, and the hiring manager wants me to fill the role, and this person wants to be hired. We all have the same goal. Right. And then through those technical interviews, I realized I'm reading the feedback cards and I'm like, wow, I missed this, I missed that. And so now I would say that it may be maybe 10%. Sometimes things change and people's motivations change during the process, but it doesn't happen as often now where I speak to a talented person and move them through the process, and only to find out that this role is not a fit.
And listen, people talk a good game. Like, people talk a good game when they're interviewing. And you even see it in memes, right? Where you see someone's like, oh, I'm a team player, whatever. Then like somebody come up to your desk and you're like, what do you want? Same concept. Yeah. Like, people talk a good game. But I do want to go back to your early stages, because you mentioned like when you began as a sourcer or recruiter, and you talk through not knowing, technical skills and those technical details, but learning that throughout the process. But I want to start all the way back. How did you even get into this type of role, especially like from the tech perspective?
Yeah, I Well, I started recruiting right out of college, and I started in manufacturing. And how it was explained to me was like, I wanted to be in a job where I could help people. And my degree is in theater. And how it was explained to me, it's like, well, you're helping people by providing them the opportunity to provide for their family. Like, it's way more than getting a job. It's how people buy food, and how people take care of their kids, and how they support themselves and buy their Chipotle or whatever the case is. And that really stuck with me. And from there, I started. I started in staffing. I was supporting the manufacturing industry. I was still in Detroit, and from there, I moved to supporting engineering for the automotive industry. And it was a little more advanced than just plain manufacturing and metal stamping. It was more of like working with Chrysler and their MVH engineers, and it's like noise vibration engineers, things that I never thought about that went into cars. I'm like, oh, there's a carpet engineer. Like, I'm like, do I even have rugs? I don't know. I would have never thought that, there's an engineer that designs the carpet to absorb sound, and now it makes sense. But originally I was like, I don't know. And during that role, I was at Advantage Technical Resources, which was a staffing agency, or is a staffing agency. They're still around. I was able to support Ford and their data engineering. And that was my first step into tech. And I was so amazed because I'm looking at these websites, and as I'm learning more, I'm like, okay, this is the front end. And we've all had Tumblr, so I'm kind of understanding, like, okay, well, this is what I was doing when I was on MySpace, and this is how I changed the color of my page, and getting a better understanding of that. From there, I took a role at Swoon Staffing in Chicago. So I finally was able to move to Chicago. That was one of the things that I wanted to do. And from there, I was straight tech recruiting. And it was very competitive. The clients that I was supporting, they used VMS systems, so vendor management systems. So I'm competing with not only my teammates, to fill the roles, but also all of these other organizations, all the other businesses that, McDonald's says, hey, we need a data center technician.
Right.
Whoever fields it, like, you get the money for it, essentially. So, may the odds be forever in your favor, and you just got to try to find the first person. You're reaching out to people that everyone's reaching out to, because we all have the same, tools and resources. We all have LinkedIn or Dice. We all have Access, Monster, these different job boards. So everyone's messaging the same people. And it was more of like, just, you had to be quick.
Well, hold on now. So
the role came out,
I want you to explain more of that competition, even with your own colleagues. So basically, were you saying you were in this role of like, whoever put someone in this role first, here, you get the money because you actually filled the role? How does that work from a recruiter standpoint?
Yes. So this is specifically VMS recruiting. And that typically happens at a staffing agency. Right now, I recruit internally, so I only support my line of business, or my organization. When it's VMS recruiting, how it was set up at the org that I was at is that there were different teams of people, and they supported these clients and these clients. So you had tiers of like bronze, silver, gold. And let's say McDonald's is a gold. That means that we have hiring manager contact. We can kind of go through the back door to send our candidates. Silver was like, well, we're on their premium list, so they would release the job description to us first. And then they have other tiers of suppliers that they work with, and then they would release it to them. And then the bronze tier is you're waiting for the job description to be released after they've released it to their premium suppliers. And so within the organization, you're competing with your teammates to get to that gold tier so you can support those clients.
Mm-hmm.
So it was based on seniority, essentially. The more hires that you get, so the longer you're there, the more hires you'll get, and you'll move up in tier to be able to support the gold tier. But you're competing at the bronze tier to get there, while also competing with the other suppliers that have already had the rec for, you know, a day or 2 days or whatever, 48 hours before they release it to
This
our
seems
org.
like, I don't know, it's almost like the Hunger Games of recruiting. It just feels like overwhelming.
It is, especially you're all reaching out to the same candidates. So if I have a project manager for this role, maybe I'm on for a bronze tier role, and you want this same project manager for a gold. I would need to let you run with the candidate because it's a higher chance, it's a higher probability that they'll actually be seen for your role versus mine. So essentially, you could just take my candidate. Essentially, you can take my candidate, and then I don't necessarily get credit for it unless I found the candidate first. If I found the candidate first, then I get to run with them with your gold job description, essentially. So yeah, it was a lot. It is essentially Hunger Games, and it does. They call it healthy competition, but I think it's not healthy because you can't help but side eye. Like, one, you're working on roles that are super easy for you. I'm struggling. Not only am I struggling, but if I do find a good candidate that you like, you can have them. Essentially, you just get to take them. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to get out of those type of roles. Like, I didn't want to work VMS anymore. It was so stressful. I would be sourcing and like making calls from like, 8 a.m. to maybe 8 p.m. Like, I'm calling people after work and after hours to try to connect with them, because these are the people that no one was able to access during the day. And so I find that I'm like, I have an advantage. The people that, like only needs to work 8 hours, they've gone home and they're done for the day. And I'm still sourcing and reaching out to people just to kind of get a leg up.
But I guess in the same vein, then you probably would not start at like, you're still a 9 to 5, but you're not going to start calling people at 9 because it makes no sense. Like, you're not going to connect to anybody by calling at 9 a.m. unless they're obviously, if they were on the market or unemployed. But usually 9 a.m. is just like everyone's starting their day, starting those meetings. So really you are working 9 to 5 plus, whatever amount of hours, probably till 10 o'clock. So you really just you never stop working.
Yeah. And even with that, people respond when they want to respond. And it's so captivating. If they respond on a Saturday, it's very hard not to just answer the call, even though I'm off. I'm like, well, this is the only time that I've gotten to connect with you. So do I just say, okay, I'm going to play video games this Saturday, or do I, try to go for my bonus? I'm going to try to go for my bonus and have that conversation. And I think that with VMS recruiting, you really look at people as a product versus actually having that human interaction. Because I was looking at it, and I can say this for me, I was looking at it as like, this is my opportunity to prove myself and move up, versus, hey, this person works really hard during the week, they don't have any time and they really want to, change their role, they're looking for something better, I can help them on Saturday.
Right.
And I think it was a shift in perception, and it's a lot easier to do that when you don't have that pressure and anxiety of like, I need to, get to the top. And what happens if I don't make this many hires a month, or if I don't hit this gross margin? So yeah, that was my experience with VMS recruiting, and then I moved into
Hopefully not Hunger
a
Games round 2.
no, it was not Hunger Games round 2, but almost similarly. Well, I worked for a digital transformation org similar to Ken and Carta before I was at Ken and Carta. And it was a contract. They wanted me to move to the Bay Area, and I was like, I did not want to move to the Bay Area. Like I've seen the cost of living there, and
no, thank you.
Like no thanks. Plus, I know we talk about Chicago weather, but I prefer to have 4 seasons because I know they exist. Versus it being like summer, maybe fall. And then I ended at Ken and Carta, and really enjoyed my time there, and was able to support different lines of business. And really, I started with supporting the QA engineers, which I really enjoyed. And then I moved over to the e-commerce, and now I am at Uber supporting the data science and applied science functions.
So Yasmine, you've had quite a journey. You've done a lot. You had to go through some Hunger Games, but now you seem to be at a pretty solid spot. So I do want to go through some questions just to ask for people who are interested in becoming a recruiter. So I know we've used kind of different terms so far: recruiter, sourcer, etc. For people who are looking to get into this role, what terms or what words should they be looking up, like on LinkedIn or in their job search, so that they can align to the right positions?
Yeah, sourcing is one, and regardless if you're a recruiter or a sourcer, that'll probably pop up. Stakeholder management, pipeline. So pipeline is what we call the candidates that are coming through. They're in the pipeline, and I think more specifically, it's important to have an understanding of what type of recruiter you want to be. If you want to be in tech, like what function do you want to support? There's so many different areas of tech that exist. Like before, I had no clue what data science is, and now I have an understanding of that. Or if you want to do software development, or if you want to work more on the project side with like Scrum Masters and project coordinators, just getting a better understanding of the tech field in general, I think would be helpful. And then more specifically for a recruiter, Boolean searching is super important, and managing an ATS. That's the applicant tracking system, and that's where all the applicants go. They're pretty similar in terms of systems. There may be a few different nuances between all of them, but I mean, once you learn the system, it's pretty easy moving forward with other systems. And it just depends on how your organization likes to track applicants. Some people don't use their applicant tracking system. Some people just use spreadsheets. I am not a spreadsheet person, but
not spreadsheets really in 2023. Like, that's too much. Yeah. I thought we were trying to get away from spreadsheets. That's why we have all these systems.
You would think. But sometimes you need a good little spreadsheet. I've been learning more about data analysts, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm understanding more why spreadsheets exist. When I used to have to use Excel or in school and stuff like that, I'm just like, I don't know what is this? Let's just do this in Word. But now, those are some of the things that I would look for. Sourcing, ATS, candidate experience. I think that's a super important one. Stakeholder management, and in bullion searching.
And Yasmine, you went from theater, being a theater major, to becoming a recruiter. What skills did you pick up besides the ones that you've already mentioned? So theater, I'm sure you didn't have to take too many business classes beforehand. So I feel like learning all of this was a little bit on the fly for you. Is that accurate?
Yes. I guess shout out to improv. Oftentimes that's what it is. Well, I think coming from theater, I think just being personable and having that common humanity, that's something that translates very well. When I think about what I've learned in theater and being like honest and open, and regardless if it's, a pretend scenario or you're working with the same partner, you have a responsibility to the other person in the scene. And I kind of take that mindset when I'm working with candidates. Like, I am responsible for my part. So I don't want to ghost you, and we're being vulnerable together, just like you would in acting. We're being vulnerable together. You're telling me the things that you want and why you're maybe unhappy or looking for a change. And so I want to honor that and treat you accordingly. I don't want to, cause you to regret the conversation that you had, and like opening up. And that's not to say that every candidate is opening up and, sharing secrets, but it's a really intimate thing to say, hey, I'm unhappy where I am, and, like, I'm looking for something more. Even if you're not unhappy, it's just like, I have different desires and I want you to help me get there. And is that a possibility? And if it isn't, I want to be transparent about that too. Like, if I don't have a job that fits what you're looking for, I want to be honest and upfront. But yeah, I think of it that way. It's like there's a level of trust and intimacy that we're sharing, and I want to, honor that and treat it gently and appreciate it.
And I think you're probably the first person that I've heard from a recruiter standpoint say that. Because, to be honest, a lot of people get ghosted. A lot of people don't. What I would say, it sounds like you handle the people that you interact with care. And I think that's different than, I won't say all recruiters, but some recruiters. And so also that makes me think, what, from your perspective, are like the characteristics that really make someone an excellent sourcer or recruiter?
One, being able to find people, because if you're not able to find anyone, then you can't move to the next step. Like, so I think that that's important. And then being genuine and being transparent. I can understand ghosting people, and I get where it comes from.
Where does it come from?
I'm not. The anxiety. I think it's I would say that it's an anxiety of disappointing someone else. Okay. I think it comes down to that, and then maybe like a lack of time management. If you don't, like, let's say, and sometimes this happens, let's say you have 1,000 candidates or 1,000 applicants that you need to go through.
Okay.
It's going to be quite difficult for you to respond to everyone. And even when you send that rejection, you may send a mass rejection saying, hey, like, this role is closed, and people are responding to that. I just simply don't have the time to respond to every response.
Right.
So it could be something like that. And I think that that's something that's simple. I mean, like, that's a simple scenario. But when someone is in the process and you've actually had a conversation with them, they've like gone to maybe an interview or, or whatever the case is, maybe it's one interview, maybe they're at the final stage and the role closed or someone else was hired for it. Mm-hmm. I would say that it is a fear of causing discomfort to someone else.
Oh,
that's okay. That's what I want to believe. Because if it's just, I don't want to believe that people just don't care enough to say it. I think that I like to believe that they care too much that it's super uncomfortable and they just can't find the words and won't say like, hey, this role is closed.
So it's a little bit of people pleasing.
It's a little bit of people pleasing.
Okay.
And avoidance. I think avoidance behavior. Yeah, I think that's what it is. If they're not lost in your inbox, because that happens to everyone for everything. And so on behalf of all recruiters, I apologize if you're not getting a response because you got lost in the inbox. It happens. And, you know, we try to go through our inbox and, you know, sort them and file and put all these tags and different filters. But sometimes you just get lost. Sometimes it happens. But I do believe that when someone is in a process, when you have a candidate in a process and you don't have the heart to tell them that they're not moving forward, I think it's because there's a fear of that maybe backlash or anxiety of like what happens after that.
I do feel like that is a natural reaction now that you say it that way. I don't know if we think like recruiters are these superhumans or not human, because I think that's a natural human response to a situation, especially one if you have a lot of emotion and passion and feeling towards it. Maybe you really want this person to get that role and they don't. You're kind of let down a little bit. So I think that's a human response.
Yeah, I agree. It's very easy to hide, and the expectation is that your recruiter wouldn't do that, but it's hard. I'll tell you about a situation. I had to rescind an offer. I had to rescind an offer once, yes, and I could not believe it. There was nothing I could do, and before I was told that I had to rescind this offer, I asked everything, is there some way that we can push the start date? Is there another role? Is there a way that we can pay this person, for 2 weeks that they did onboarding? Because the candidate, they had their laptop and everything, they were ready to go. I had to call them the Friday before they started that Monday and say hey, actually, no.
Send that on back.
And it took me maybe 2-3 hours to work up the nerve to call this person. I knew that I had to do it, and I knew that it wasn't at any fault of my own. It's just the role closed, and they closed the entire project, and there wasn't anything come down the pipeline, and there was nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that just happens. Business is unpredictable at times. But I felt, because this is a person I've been talking to for a month and a half, and we've talked about his kids and his family and aspirations and where he wants to move later, and I know your dog's name, at this point we're friends. We build up that rapport and that relationship, and now I have to tell you, actually, you don't have a job. That's, and you think about it, these are people's livelihoods. Hey, right. I have a family to take care of. Who knows? And he had just went on vacation to celebrate getting a job, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to call you while you're driving back from Disneyland.
Oh no.
Sort of thing. And tell you that you don't have a job, and could you please bring back your laptop? And I was just like, oh my gosh, he's not gonna give back the laptop, he's gonna sell it. I mean, that's what and if you did, I wouldn't be mad at you. I totally understand. I need to get something. I got a free laptop. That's how I would approach it.
And then to think about, he went from the happiest place on earth to you come back and you ain't got no job. That's bad.
The unemployed.
Yeah.
And I was about to cry. I had to go in the bathroom and call him. I don't know, the bathroom just seemed like a safe place, and I'm like, hey, unfortunately, this is what happened. I've already reached out to my network of recruiters just to see if anyone else is looking for your particular role. Like, I sent your resume out. I'm messaging other recruiters that I'm seeing posting jobs like, hey, there's nothing wrong with this candidate. Here's their scores. They score really well with us. It's just that this is the thing that happened. And if you could help them and take them on, I appreciate it. And that response, it was like I care for you as a person. So I want to help you out. And having that response, he appreciated it, but also, it was still kind of like, ugh. And he was nice enough to say, like, hey, I know this is not your fault. So giving that reassurance. And crazy thing is, maybe like a week or two went by, he hadn't given back his laptop. And I was just about to call him to say, like, hey, could you please send your laptop?
Yeah.
A role opened up, and he was able to keep it, and he was able to start immediately. I was just like, oh my gosh, thank goodness. Like, that was the universe, prayer, God, whoever. Yes, like magic. I was so grateful and so relieved, because it's like, now I have to kind of be, stern and like, hey, you need to return this laptop. And I'm like, why is this my responsibility? I don't want to be this person. Like, shouldn't, I don't know, acquisitions or, asset management take care of this? I didn't send him a laptop, so I don't want anything to do with this. Y'all need to figure that out. Like, I gave him I gave him an offer letter. I got that back. I did my part. I don't want to pull up, and like ask for this MacBook badge. So awkward. But he was able to start, and so his start date was just delayed. I was so happy that it worked out that way, but sometimes it doesn't. And so it's really, I think that the quality of a recruiter for me that I appreciate is the transparency and just like the genuine care for one human to another, from one person to another, because everyone has something going on in their lives.
Yes.
And at the very least, I can be transparent with you so I don't waste your time. And at the very least, I can be a helping hand, even if it's not a role within my organization. And if I see something, I'm more than happy to send candidates other jobs, because it's about you being happy. And also, if we're all connected, I'm helping you within my network. You're going to help me within your network when I do need help, when I'm looking for that person that, that hard to find person, you may suggest someone to me. So it's just sort of, give to receive, and you keep that energy going.
Yeah. And Yasmine, we have to go back in your story because there's 2 points I have to touch on. First one being that you, after his offer was rescinded, you went within your own network to try to find this person a job. Is that, I don't want to say is that normal, but I feel like you go above and beyond in your role. And I just want to, like, is that true, or is that what people in your role are supposed to do?
I would say no, it's not what we're supposed to do. Typically, if there's a candidate, or you have a candidate within your network, you want to keep them in your network, and so giving them away, or like sending them other jobs, probably isn't the best. Wouldn't be appreciated from a business standpoint. Because it's like, we did this work to get this candidate. We rather, put them in a bucket of like people that we would call in the future versus securing them a job somewhere else, and now we don't have access to them. So I would say no, that it's not a best practice. And also, morally, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to hold on to you just because there's a job that may come,
Right.
I'm not going to lead you on. And it was such a unique situation. Like, you just had a job, and you were going to go to work in 2 days, and now you're not. So,
yeah,
like, what can we do? And I just looked at it from that perspective. Like, what can I do now with the tools that I have to help this person?
Right.
because if they come back later, it's possible you can come back later. I have people that come back to me from, I had a person that reached out to me, was like, hey, I'm trying to get my offer letter signed. I'm like, I don't work there anymore. So I can't, I can ask somebody to help you, but if you have an offer letter, you should reach out to the person that gave you the offer letter. Like, I don't work there. I can't do anything. But I've built up that rapport in those relationships so much that people still reach out to me for different things, and they'll refer people to me for different things. And ultimately, we're all looking for the same thing. You need a job. I need someone to, I need to get someone a job. So if you're getting a job over here, that clears up, my responsibilities of communicating, this role to you as well. So I also think about it that way. Like, so there's a lot of benefits to doing that, because then they're not like sort of chasing after you. We can close the book and kind of put a nice little wrap on it. In my opinion, that's how I feel about it.
Now, the second piece, though, I want to touch on is you having to get this laptop back, and these situations. So not only are you the recruiter and the sourcer, you are now the body of the company, where it's like, give us these laptops back because we messed up. But how did that onus, how does that get onto you all? Like, I feel like there should be a middleman or something. It shouldn't be on the recruiter or sourcer to be doing all of this, what I would call body work of being the person to have to retrieve items and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that the only way that I can think of is that, okay, so when you're talking to a sourcer, you're talking to your recruiter, that's the person that you've built the most rapport with. So if I'm going to work with anybody, I'm probably going to work with this person, versus some random person reaching out to me and saying, hey, get my laptop back. It's like, you don't even know my situation. And especially in this situation, it could have been very heated. It could have been very, aggressive and like unfriendly. Mm-hmm. So it's probably better to talk to the person that that you do know the most, that you've been talking to the most, versus, someone else, because I could imagine, and that was one of my fears of like, he's going to hold this laptop hostage,
right.
Someone needs to pay me before I give this laptop back. And I was able to I would probably be like the negotiator, the person that comes in and kind of like talks them down. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's how it sort of fell in my responsibility. But yeah, I do agree that there should be a middle person for those situations. Even with rescinding the offer, I feel like I understand why I did it, why I needed to do it. But at the moment that I was told that, I was like, oh, so you're going to do this because you're a manager, right? Someone else is going to have this conversation and manage it and do the manager thing, because like, this is, this is supervisor, like, can I speak to a supervisor sort of thing? Like, this is not, this is not for me. But it worked out. And after having that situation, I just felt like I can tell anybody anything. Like, so I have no trouble saying like, okay, this role is closed, or just closed, or like, hey, they're changing the responsibilities and your profile doesn't necessarily align anymore. Mm-hmm. Do you want to still go for it, or do you not want to go for it? Chances are, it may be better to hold off for something that is a little more aligned with your goals. This is not the type of job that you're describing to me, that you're interested in. These are benefits. This is the salary. Like, I don't have an issue being transparent about anything. Like, I feel like that was the hardest conversation I've had to have. Mm-hmm. And until I have something harder, everything else is just like, I'll just tell you, like, this is what it is. And like, with love and care, this is what it is. And it's easy. Everything is easy now.
Well, at least like there was a lesson learned from the situation. Some good came out of it.
Yes, yes, most definitely. I'm stronger than yesterday. I can say that.
And Yasmine, to kind of wrap up some of our conversation today, I do want to dig in more and kind of jump into the brain of a recruiter or sourcer. So I want to talk from being like the applicant or the person that you're pursuing, what you see from your vision. So the first thing is, obviously you mentioned going on LinkedIn and you find individuals that you would say like, hey, we have these roles open. When you're on LinkedIn and you're looking for people, who are the people that actually draw your attention? Who are you like, I need to go talk to them because I think they'd be a great fit for an open role that I have?
Oh, easy. One, having a photo, whether that's a Bitmoji or an icon or whatever,
Yeah.
that helps a lot because it's like we're having in recruiting, it's such personable work. You're working with people. And so I need to be able to identify you as a person. So if I see like, no photo, I'm like, is this person even on LinkedIn? Like what's going on? And I know that sometimes people feel more shy about putting up their actual photo. That's why I suggest like you do a Bitmoji, and that way it's like it's still an essence of you without it actually being you, without you actually having to, expose yourself. So photos always help, or Bitmojis, and then people that have some sort of personality in their profile. Like, yes, it's nice to know what skills you worked on and which projects you've done, but and also who are you as a person? Like how can we connect outside of this? Because it's I understand that we're going to have this call and we're going to go over all the technical skills and your motivations for a job. But also, do you like anime? What how am I going to communicate with you and how are we going to interact? And I think that having just like a personal piece, whether it's you do puzzles or at least one hobby, helps. And I've spoken to people where I'm like, I would never do this, like I would never scuba dive, or whatever the case is. And we have a conversation about that, and that gives me a better understanding of this person and sort of what they need from our working relationship as well. So I would say those two aspects, and then always listing out your skills as in the order of which you work with them the most. And subconsciously we do that as anyways. A lot of times I'll look at a profile and it may say, Java, Python, and then if SQL's at the end, that's probably what you work with a lot less. But yeah, having those details on your profile, and also your stakeholders, who are you working with, and a little description of your team. Those are all the things that I would look for.
Now, I do have to ask, because LinkedIn is so serious, or I'll say business oriented, right? Because you want to show off that you're doing all this stuff. How do you add that personal piece to make it so people get to know you? Like you mentioned, having hobbies and sharing that and connecting that way. How do you show that on your LinkedIn profile? Or do you save that more so for the interview part, or for both?
I would do both. So I would add it to my intro. And then also LinkedIn has I should know this because the headlines. And in my headline for the longest, it was like, I think my headline said Spotify user. I had to change that because a lot of people thought that I worked for Spotify. And I'm like, no, I'm just like strongly against Apple Music. Spotify user, and then Uno enthusiast. I love Uno. I have like 17 Uno decks. Every time an Uno deck comes out, I'll get it. And so people will message me like, hey, do you play Uno online? Or like share a playlist with me. And those are nice conversations to have. And it doesn't have to be like, hey, I'm looking for a job, or hey,
right,
I need you for a job. I can like actually engage with you on a personal level, and you can see if you would want to work with me, because just because a recruiter reaches out to you doesn't mean you actually want to work with that person. They may be, unpleasant, or, like they may be disingenuous, not your vibe. And so how do you kind of figure out, the vibe? So right. I would say your your headline, your intro. You can also join different groups on LinkedIn. They don't necessarily have to be for business. I know a lot of them are geared towards, your skill set or whatever language you're coding in or working on. But there's also a lot of like LinkedIn for anime or anime for LinkedIn, like that shows the things that you're interested in. And I keep referencing anime because that's what I'm into. But if you're into baking, maybe a thing there, or share a different article about bake shop or, snack versus chef, whatever you're watching, or the things that you like, or people were into the zombie show. I don't know what it is.
Walking Dead.
Walking Dead. There you go. That was a really big one. That was a really big one. Game of Thrones was a really big one, and I feel like there's a lot of like work-related memes and different articles that you can share that's still work-related and professional while also showing your personality. So I think, yeah, share some things, join some groups, share some things, and write it down in your intro and your headline.
Nice. I'm actually going to take some of these tips for myself so I can update and be a little bit more personable.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, in regards to once you start connecting with people and you get that to the point of a recruiter screen, for people who are listening and they're going through the process, what's maybe like one or two things that you can do during that process to make you memorable, but also kind of get you to that next round?
Yeah, I think a follow-up email is always great. Then also for me, I let every candidate that I speak to know, like, hey, you can text me. I will respond quicker to text just because there's a lot of business emails coming through. Mm-hmm. So you have access to me that way. Shoot a text over or send the email if you prefer that. And just say like, hey, I really like the conversation that we had, and please send me the job description. Chances are, if I spoke to you, I already sent you the job description because that's how I go. I personally will send the job description, salary range, our benefits after I get off every call. But just responding and saying, hey, I received this, and I referenced something from the conversation, and that follow-up email. I think that helps you become memorable. Also, Bitmoji. I'm gonna.
Why Bitmoji?
People remember photos, images more than words. And Bitmoji has a plugin, an email plugin. That's it.
Good to know.
I do like that.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, you do like emojis a little bit better. It's like, I feel, especially like with this generation, a lot of people talk through memes and emojis. So it's like, that's all relative. Mm-hmm. And Yasmine, is there any story that you can share about just like something that would be helpful for the listeners of just like a experience that you've had within the process that you really remember and made an impression on you?
Let me think here.
Okay. And if not, I have another backup question ready.
Well, I would say one of the things that always leaves an impression on me is resumes that don't have any information, and then LinkedIn's that don't have any information. And when I say no information, it's just like your title and your job description. And I was looking for a React developer, and I went through this. I'm screening applicants, so I'm going through the applications. Mm-hmm. Resume said nothing, and I imagine it's because they like chose the option to upload for LinkedIn as their resume, which you can do. But if your LinkedIn doesn't have anything on it, then why would you do that? So I send them a rejection email. And this is one of the times that I was getting responses from the rejection emails. And I'm like trying to have a conversation to be like, hey, like, this is what's going on. Oftentimes you can send the rejections from like a do not reply, but in this case, I didn't have that option. So it's just coming from my email. They know who rejected them. And so the resume didn't say anything. LinkedIn didn't say anything. It's just title. And I'm just like, I don't know what you do. And when there's 300, 400 candidates, I'm not going to, pick up the phone and inquire any further. It's just like, okay, well, this is the effort that you put in. And so,
yeah,
bye.
what you want me to do?
I'm going to continue, and so I send the rejection and they respond like, I have like 12 years of experience and this is ridiculous. And, like, why wouldn't you just call to figure it out? And I'm like, why would I do that? Like,
right.
Why would I just call you to say, oh, well, what do you do? I'm not going to do that. And so we're like essentially arguing back and forth via email. And they're like, well, how was I supposed to know to update my LinkedIn? And I'm like, because you're applying for a job. Like, what did you think? I don't just need your phone number and your name. I'm not just going to call you because of that.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What do you do?
Who are you at this point?
Yes, who even, if there's no photo on the LinkedIn, I'm like, who is this? Like,
mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that stood out to me. And it happens every so often, but I just think it's funny because it's like, what world do you live in, where you just don't have any information floating around and you just you expect me to reach out? Like, what am I reaching out for? To figure out who you are? Like, that's not my job.
That's not how this works.
What I'm doing, and I can't do that for every person. Yeah, exactly. Like, you could have wrote something like, hey, I have 12 years of experience. You could have said that like as a cover letter or something like that. But yeah, those experiences always, when the people have when they have the pushback, I think they stand out more than just seeing a resume. It's like, okay, you didn't put anything on there. I don't know what happened. And I just keep pushing. It's like, you have put all this energy into responding to me when you could have just wrote something on your resume. You could have just wrote something on your resume. Like, I'm sensible.
Well, apparently thought you
say something.
Be sensible enough to just call him and find out who he is. Like, that is not how the interview process goes, but okay, if that's what you think.
Yeah, and there wasn't even a note of like, please call. Like, I'll tell you everything.